All right, if we could put our friend Jamie McGoldrick on the screen. There he is. We're delighted to welcome back Jamie McGoldrick, who you all know is the resident coordinator, the humanitarian coordinator, and you must, I think you have a third hat, deputy special coordinator for the UN in the Occupied Palestinian Territory. So Jamie, you've just come back from Gaza. The floor is yours, and there are quite a few questions for you. And thank you for your patience.
Thanks very much, Stefan. I hope you can hear me okay. Yeah, I was in Gaza the last few days. I got back last night, and unlike previous visits, the thing that was different this time was a noticeable less congestion of people in Rafah itself. And what we hear is the fact that people have started to leave Rafah. Displaced people who were in Rafah have left now because they fear a military incursion might happen. So they've moved back north to Deir al Balah. Some have gone to Khan Yunis, and many of them have gone to Mawasi, which is the area in the sand dunes on the coast. I think there's obviously enormous and growing needs for over 2.3 million people living in appalling conditions. The humanitarian supplies that have come into Gaza in February fell by half of what they were in January. So we have really got some serious constraints there. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to prepare a two-pronged approach or a contingency plan for two eventualities. One would be a humanitarian pause, and the other one would be a military incursion into Rafah itself. I mean, the challenges are we don't have an adequate supply chain, and we're not able to pre-position supplies in the event of a military incursion. And if hundreds of thousands, which we expect to be the case, would have to move, there are no easy options where people would go to. And obviously right now we're struggling to address the needs of the population who are static. So we're facing some serious challenges here. I mean, we want to do more, we're ready to do more, but there are constraints. There's a rapid rise of disease and food insecurity, and we've produced many more medical cases that we can handle. And particularly the old people, they're sick and injured, but as well as the trauma, there's the regular chronic illnesses that are there. The health system's on its knees. The water and sanitation issues are, paramount, and they're affecting many, many people's lives here. We're in serious shelter shortage in terms of tents and plastic sheeting. We don't have enough. And then equally into the camps, and I'll talk about some of the camps later, the service delivery of water, sanitation, food, and health supplies to these camps is just really insufficient. The numbers are way beyond our capacity to respond. We had a WFP convoy yesterday was tending to go to the north. There was 14 trucks on that, and it was delayed or held up at the checkpoint at the Wadi Gaza. It was then rerouted, and by the time it got through, it was into daylight hours, and the 14 trucks with food on board for the north was completely looted or ransacked. So that's a big issue. These are some of the constraints. We've started discussions today with COGAT. We're hoping to start using the military road or the fence road, which runs up the eastern side of Gaza. And it's one that the military use themselves. And hopefully we can get WFP to have a food convoy there, which would take us into the north without going through the very congested south. And that may be something we could use for the future. Because in the future, we'll have to use all roads possible. That will be the beach road, which is the only one available right now. The middle road, which is Sakladin Road, which has been out of action because of military activity. And hopefully this new fence or military road on the eastern side can be a way for us to get material into the north. But let me talk about some of the human stories that I met. I was able to meet some community leaders inside Gaza and Rafah, and these people came from the central area, some from Khan Yunis and some from Rafah, and they talked about, it was a big meeting, community meeting, to talk about their rights and the needs and their desire for a dignified life despite the conditions. And there was a woman teacher in the room in the meeting, and she was concerned about the threat of the Rafah incursion, and she said that her son had packed his school bag, not for school, but to be a displaced person. And I think that's the situation there at the moment. The group and this whole group, and mostly men, highlighted the plight of women and children and the impact of the war is having on them, on the privacy and hygiene issues for women and the nutritional concerns for children. It was a very important meeting to meet people from, mayors and community leaders and mullahs and muqtars, as well as women school teachers and others. I mean, the impact of women and children on this war was something that was echoed later when I went to a camp setting, lay-in camp in Al Mawasi, and I was able to meet in a tent. I was the only man in the room, and it was all women, all Palestinian women, and they were all displaced. And they told me of their daily lives in the camp. And there was very little in the way of support services that go into these camps. And this camp was established by a community group, a local community group. It wasn't set up by any NGO or UN agency. And, the thing that emerged from that conversation, there are serious gender-based violence issues that are emerging. They talked about sexual harassment on the way to the latrines in the evenings, especially, where there's no segregated toilets and there's no lighting and no security. They again flagged the whole issue of privacy for them as women. The hygiene issues were flagged, the lack of clean water. Some of them talked about using the seawater to wash with, and there was nothing in the way of female sanitary products. So this is something that emerged quite strong, and these people talked about very openly, which was in a very conservative society to a Western male was something I was quite shocked at. A woman described her journey to the camp from Khan Yunis at the end of January, and she said she'd given birth earlier, 2 days earlier, and she was forced to move and leave her home and go to this camp. And she was with herself, her other 4 children. One of them were disabled, and she was held at the checkpoint for 6 hours before she could move on. Another woman with twins delivered in a shelter. She had no neonatal care, no medicine, and now she can't even breastfeed because the lack of nutrition in her diet, because she's using and eating only mainly canned food and bread. So women were very open, and I was, it was quite embarrassing. They asked for underwear and sanitary products and different clothes as the weather was changing. And many women spoke of the desperate living conditions and the impact it's having on the relationship with husbands. Some of the husbands are very angry and despondent because they can't provide for their families. And one of the women said to me, at night when you walk through the camps, you can hear the women crying in the tents. And one woman actually mentioned in that, she says that her husband was so angry with her, he took her out into the open place and he beat her in front of the other women of the camp. So it's a very desperate situation when you find something like that happening in a very conservative society. A mother with a 25-year-old son who's disabled, he can't move out of the tent. The tent is so hot and the sand is so deep, she can't use her wheelchair for the sun. So it's something that's really, really troubling. And, she said, all I want to do is take him outside and let him have a shave and a haircut. That's what she said. So on the children's front, the mothers complained about the lack of nutritional products for kids, lack of fresh food, living on tin food and bread, the lack of instruction, the lack of school opportunities, and the fact that the discipline of children is starting to change. So, I mean, there's another woman there with 7 children, 2 of them with mental disorders, one son with a kidney complaint. He can't drink the water because it's affecting his diet. And, and then women, all of them expressed the worry and the concern that Ramadan is coming next week and they've got nothing to prepare for their families, nothing they can give them. And so it was actually quite a shock to get all of the human dimension of the stuff we talk about, access and response and the stuff that we normally do. So I'd say that we have to fix things very much so in the context of Gaza for women, for children, for vulnerable groups, disabled and others. And there was one woman who told me, she said that she can't even find the batteries for the hearing aid of her deaf son. And so he's completely lost because he can't hear anything. And that kind of thing it's quite tragic when you hear this. And so I would say that, one of the things that the message I would put out there is that, hunger has reached catastrophic levels, and especially in the north of Gaza, which we haven't served for weeks. And yesterday's convoy attempt was again disrupted because of the ransacking of that and the insecurity. Their children are now, as we see in the images on the media, who are dying of hunger-related diseases. And in order to prevent that from happening, we have to have a plan that allows us to prevent famine. We need to significantly scale up the humanitarian assistance in there. And that would be that, we have to use this military road, this fence road at the side, on the eastern side, to allow material to come from the crossing point at Kerem Shalom and Rafah all the way up to the north and into the north, into a crossing point there. And we have to get up at least 300 trucks a day. Right now, we're lucky if we're getting about 150. And so to address those issues properly, we have to do that. And then lastly, I would say that the Ashdod port, which is in the north of Gaza, is there. It's an open, modern port that is well equipped, and we should be able to use that rather than trying to create another port further down in this maritime event. And these other options like airdrops, these are helpful, but these are not going to address the significant needs, which can only be done by road transport. And that's something we have to do. So I'll stop there, Steph, and take questions.
Great, thank you. Edie?
Thank you very much, Jamie. On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, my name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. First, a follow-up on the looting of this convoy. All 14 trucks were looted on the inside Gaza when they got through the checkpoint. Could you just confirm that that's true, and which checkpoint it is, and what happened to the convoy? And secondly, you've painted a really grim, dire picture for us, and what you've seen and all of these responses that you've gotten from Palestinians in Gaza, have you communicated them to the Israelis? Have you gotten any response? Do you expect any changes? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Edith, thanks very much. On the convoy was scheduled to go north. It was pre-arranged with all the facilitation from Israel. It was to go to the beach road and wait there at the holding point, and then to cross over into Wadi Gaza. But after a delay at the holding point, they were then rerouted to the other side of the Wadi Gaza on the Saladin Road. And then as it was getting later in the day, the idea is to get there in as early as possible to avoid the crowds. And by the time they got through, the crowds were already there. And these crowds are there most days awaiting the possibility of a convoy. And when it comes there, you've got people who are so desperate, they've had nothing in the way of food or support on a regular basis for such a long time. So these people are so desperate that they stop the truck and they systematically ransack the truck and take all the goods off the back. And it's used simply for people who are in desperate need of food, because there's no other source of food other than this truck that comes up, these trucks that come up there. And so it's a desperate situation until we can flood. And I mean really flood the north and the 300,000 people in the north, get some semblance of support. The desperation will always cause these convoys to be looted or ransacked. On your question on the response from Israel, we are in constant dialogue with Israel over getting convoys moved in there, getting supplies moved in there into Gaza, and trying to open up new access corridors like the road I talked about, the fence road. And in conversations today, we've been given the green light to use that road. Maybe tomorrow, and it'll have to be recce'd first of all, and then hopefully we can use that as a supply route into the north, because it's important that we do that. Otherwise, we're going to, as we've seen already, some of the starvation that's arising, and there's going to be a famine committee report in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I think that will just basically consolidate what we think we already know.
Thank you. Michelle Nichols, Reuters.
Thanks, Jamie. Michelle from Reuters. I just wanted to follow up a little bit more about what you were telling us about this road. It's a military road just inside the fence within Gaza, and does that mean you enter through Kerem Shalom, and why is this road better? I have some thoughts as to why, but if you could tell us why this road might be better. You just said you've been given the green light to maybe use it tomorrow. What would that involve? Just if you could enlighten us a bit on that, that'd be great.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, this road runs parallel to the edge of Gaza Strip. It's on the eastern side, and it's a road that the military use to use their own, supply lines and deliver, moving in. They have a number of crossing points into below Carney. There's a place called Berry, which is the crossing point they'll probably use. The idea would be that you get the trucks scanned, and there'll be 14 or 15 trucks from WFP will be scanned. They go outside onto the road, and then they enter into this route. I think it's called Route 93 or 96. And then you go north on that road. There is no traffic on that road other than military traffic. So it should be a straight run. And then you come to the north part of it. During that journey on the military route, you'll be escorted by IDF. But once we go inside through the Berry crossing, there'll be no IDF escorts. At that point in time, the convoy will go inside and head to distribution points.
Thank you. Sherwin, then Ibtisam, and then Abdelhamid.
Thanks, Mr. McGoldrick. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, South African Broadcasting. As humanitarian coordinator for Gaza, what was your reaction to the ICJ's provisional measures handed down on Israel? And what can you say about the implementation of those measures as it relates to your specific mandate in the Gaza enclave?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, what we're looking for is an enhanced humanitarian response. But I think we've seen from some of the statistics coming out recently from a couple of people who monitor that, they've shown that the numbers of trucks have gone down. So the enhanced part of humanitarian assistance hasn't been arrived at. There's been lots of reasons for that. There's been a lot of insecurity around the Kerem Shalom Rafah crossing, with a number of Bedouin families and other smuggling groups who have been disrupting the supply chain of goods in there. But then equally outside in the actual the place, Rafah and beyond, the blue police who we had been using in the past to help convoy escorts and to crowd control inside the crossing points, they were taken out of it by Israeli instructions. And so we had a security vacuum, and law and order issues were seriously problematic, and that interrupted the flow of aid that we could bring in and move around. And that's some of the reasons why the numbers of trucks coming in and the supplies of trucks getting in therefore didn't match up to what was expected through the ICJ on the humanitarian enhanced response.
Thank you. Ibtisam, Abdelhamid, then Sarife, then Yvonne.
Thank you. My name is Ibtisam Azim, Al Arab Al Jadid newspaper. You talked about gender-based violence and sexual harassment. And if I got you right, we are talking about this issue within the Palestinian society. So my question here, within the camps and other places. So my question here, whether there is any support for these women and for the people who are facing these challenges. I know you are overwhelmed and you are not even able to provide the basics, but to which extent are you able to get support to the communities there? And I saw a lot of reports about people, whether doctors or psychologists or social workers, who would like to go to Gaza and maybe aid and provide support to these workers in these sectors. How difficult it is for these people to enter Gaza from Rafah, since we know that, if I'm not mistaken, Israel is not allowing people to enter. So could you elaborate on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, just in that camp, which I visited yesterday, the Layyan camp, it was very interesting that there was two women who had basically set up this camp, and they were part of the community, the neighbouring community, and they had set up this camp with view to supporting women who they knew had faced gender-based violence issues. And so they did have, in one part of the camp, which was cordoned off, a safe space for women. And that was very unusual because there's not many places where safe spaces and places where women can go for help exist, simply because the numbers are so massive in terms of the population who have been displaced into the Rafah area and in Mawasi, whereas I was yesterday. We don't have the basic services, the water supply, sanitation, having places where people can bath. We don't have that, food supplies, and even mobile health points. And then to then put on top of that the need for this is quite a massive ask. We know there are many people out there who've offered their services to come into Gaza to help these issues, and we would welcome it. But it's such a difficult place to enter and to get visas through that, or to come through Cairo, which is a 30-hour journey. It's very, very difficult and very off-putting. The people who do make that journey to come in are the ones that we probably need most at the moment, which is the emergency medical teams who are coming in to support the hospitals. But for these specialised services, as you mentioned, we don't have the capacity to absorb them at this time, and nor can we provide the services except when communities set them up themselves.
Thank you. Abdelhamid, then Serife, then Yvonne, then Deji.
Thank you, sir, and I commend you for your passionate remarks. I have a few questions. My name is Abdelhamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. There are talks, sir, about the invasion of Rafah is imminent. Did you trace any preparation for that invasion, and what do you see if that happens? What will be the consequences? And also reports that Israel is cutting off Gaza into two, north and south, and they're building or opening a major road in between to keep the two entities apart. So if that is also from your visits to Gaza, if you had seen this road being opened by Israel.
Let's keep it to two for now, because there are a lot of questions, and Jamie doesn't have that much time. Go ahead, Jamie. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for the questions. Yeah, I mean, we are very worried about the incursion into Gaza, the military incursion, if it does take place, because simply we're not prepared. Right now, we're actually addressing the needs of 1.4 million people who are displaced into the Rafah area. So we have a contingency plan in place to do that. If a majority of those people are forced to move because of any military incursion into Rafah, we have a contingency plan on top of a contingency plan. And we don't have the supplies to pre-position the necessary material, food and shelter to absorb people if they do move. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know where people would move to, because Mawasi, over the weeks I've been going there, every week I go there, more and more space gets taken up by new camps that arrive, new tents that arrive. So it would be a big issue for us to be able to do anything about that. Your second question on the road across from east to west, there is a road already there. It's always been there. I don't know whether it's been strengthened or expanded. I really can't say.
Serife, then Yvonne, then Deji, and Augusta.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. This is Serife Çetin from Anadolu. You've personally warned against looming famine, and you've mentioned death due to starvation yourself. And according to the Gaza Ministry of Health, the number of people who have starved to death has reached 20, with actually the youngest victim being only 14 days old. According to your experience on the ground, who do you think is responsible for this? And do you fear that the number of people who may die because of lack of water and lack of food will increase in the near future? And just one more question. US officials have been emphasizing the need to achieve a ceasefire before Ramadan and during the holy month of Ramadan. But Ramadan, from what I know, is a month to show solidarity with people who don't have the same means and resources as you do. So from what you see, are the people in Gaza in any condition to practice Ramadan or the upcoming Eid? Because it seems that they are being deprived of the basic means to survive. So waiting for Ramadan, how logical is this? What is your reaction to this? Thank you.
Thanks very much. On your first question, I mean, I've seen the reports from various sources, and I've seen media reports showing the sort of these emaciated children have come in, and that young boy, 14 days, who died. Yeah, I think he was the first one. I mean, I do believe that given the conditions that people face in the north, the water and sanitation, the lack of adequate health, and obviously, as we mentioned, the lack of food supplies on a regular basis, especially targeting some of the people who are the most vulnerable. You know, it's not I think it's quite predictable to say that there will be really serious acute malnutrition in these areas. And I know that reports from UNICEF and others have started to show that. I think overall there'll be a lot of preventable deaths, not just in the north, but also in the south, linked to the conditions that people live in, the squalid nature of that, the sort of the stress they live under, and the lack of medical and food supply that we can give them. So I think the IPC report, which comes out in a few weeks' time, I think will show quite clearly the deterioration that's taken place since the last one was done at the end of November, beginning December. You know, your point on Ramadan was well taken. It was something that in the camp I met yesterday with a woman who stressed how unhappy they were and how concerned they were that they were unable to celebrate Ramadan properly, and they don't have the necessary goods and material and food and even cooking gas to actually celebrate in a way the Eid and the other parts of that. So I think it's something that will cause a real degree of consternation, shall we say, for families throughout, and there are so many, if not all families in Gaza will struggle to celebrate Ramadan in any normal way.
Thank you. Deji, then Augusta. Oh, sorry, Yvonne. I'm sorry, Yvonne. I apologize.
Thank you. Yvonne Moriarty, News. My question is about the attitudes of the people in the camps the conversations that you described. I know for the most part you were talking about their basic needs, but did you manage to get a sense from them about their attitudes towards the outside world, to the response by the international community to the conflict there? Did you get any sense of how they believe the international community has responded? Any comments on that? Can you share any details?
Yeah, well, I think that what you get from them is a degree of disappointment. You know, the fact that this has gone on now for 5 months, and some people I spoke to had been displaced more than once. Some of them were actually refugees, so it was quite ironic that they had moved again and again. Some of them spoke quite passionately about the dignity in life, or the need for dignity in life, and they talked about how their human rights hadn't been addressed properly. And but they didn't directly say anything against the international community or the international world. I don't think that I didn't probe for those questions, but there were people who made small speeches about human rights and the UN and what the UN stands for. That came up.
Deji, then Augusta, and then Maggie.
Hi, Mr. McGoldrick, Xu Deji, China Central Television. I just want to ask you, during your visit, have you talked to people about the airdrop humanitarian delivery? How much difference does those airdrops from multiple countries make in the humanitarian situation there?
Thanks. I mean, I think airdrops help, but they're not an alternative to road transport. We're talking about bulk requirement. A plane like an AC-130 or a Hercules that drops 3 tons, a truck will be able to deliver between 20 and 30 metric tons. So it's 10 times. I think that the worry is that the airdrops are not targeted. They don't get to the people who most need it. I think that's part of the issue. For bulk food, it's probably not the best use of money, resources. I think that for specialized food products, like, if you were sending in, supplementary high energy food for children, it may be a good use of food. For other times, it's probably best used for medical supplies or technical supplies. But it's actually quite random when it drops, because you're never quite sure where it will land. And we know that donors who give us the funding for our humanitarian assistance, they always insist that we target it. They always insist that we get end user to make sure that it's not diverted. Well, you're throwing large quantities out of a plane and parachutes. Some of it landed in the sea, as you saw, and some of it goes elsewhere, and you never know who gets it. I would suggest that maybe the strongest people were the ones who would pick that up, and they're not necessarily the ones who need it. That said, I think anything we can do, be it from sea routes or from air, would be supplementary to the main need for us to get more access to the north, more trucks through the south, and a bigger quantity of delivery in all parts of Gaza at this point.
Augusta, then Maggie, then Stefano.
Thank you so much for that. Augusta Saraiva with Bloomberg News. Just a quick follow-up to the airdrops question, because you mentioned between 20 and 30 tons per truck. Do you have an estimate of how many meals would be included in that? And what kind of foods are being delivered right now?
Delivered by air is specialized food. It's normally things which are like plumpy nut, which is a use for high energy supplements for children who don't get regular food. For the airdrops, I've seen some of the packaging. It's been meals ready to eat, MREs, and those are pre-cooked meals that you can eat almost immediately. The trucks deliver a combination of flour and a combination of food parcels, both from UNRWA and from WFP, and that's what's normally used in trucks. That wouldn't be used in dropping airplanes.
Thank you, Maggie, then Stefano, and then we'll go to the screen.
Hi, Mr. McGoldrick. It's Margaret Bashir with Voice of America. Here in New York, the Security Council has been struggling for several months to get a ceasefire resolution. And I'm just wondering what the message from the ground, from the people in Gaza that you spoke to about the need for a ceasefire was.
Well, I didn't ask them the question, but obviously it came up. That's what they wanted when we talked about the needs. Clearly, people want to get back to a normal life where they are right now, which has been disrupted, and we're living in very unsatisfactory, squalid conditions with not the right amount of services. And as when you get a time like Ramadan coming up, it pulls into focus how desperate people find themselves in. So I think people are looking for a way to get back to something normal, something more stable, and something more certain. And hopefully that will happen in the near future, and hopefully that we get some sort of pause which will allow us to stabilize people's health, people's food security. And that's something we're hoping for in the coming weeks.
Stefano, and then we'll go to the screen.
Yes, thank you, Stefano Vaccara. La Voce di New York. I had the same question, but there is an aspect that maybe you can answer. The ambassador, U.S. ambassador, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, that she just gave us a stakeout where she was talking about this resolution that they're circulating and presenting very soon. If you could talk to her in this moment, what it will be in that resolution that cannot, that you think should be there, cannot be missing, a priority for this resolution?
I think it would be a couple of things. I think it would be, we have to get a predictable supply of food, necessary food, medicine, and water, sanitation, and shelter material into Gaza, all parts of Gaza. We have to have more routes opened up that allows us to service the supply to all the populations there. We need to have security for the work that we do as humanitarians. And I would just say that, that would require to be able to reach parts of Gaza, wherever people are, without any restrictions, and facilitated by the military who control the area.
Thank you. We'll go to the screen. Rami from Al Jazeera Arabic. Rami.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the briefing, Mr. McGoldrick. Last time you spoke to us, you told us that you were not able to bring in children's insulin pens. I'm wondering if that's still the case. And there, you also mentioned a lot of other medications that Israel was not allowing into Gaza. Just wondering if that is still the case, and if you can give us any sense whether you got any visibility into the dual-use items list that you wanted to get.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, we have made progress on that front. We've been able to have long conversations and, regular conversations with different parts of COGAT to get the list that's there. We call it a restricted list, to try and get those items which are essential for our work. And the two main parts of our work that's essential is the health aspect, and to trying to get some of the items off the health into our use as humanitarian response. And the second one is probably more complicated, is water and sanitation, because that requires sometimes heavy equipment and sometimes big generators and pumps, spare parts and chemicals. That still causes some issues, but we're making progress.
Thank you. Jordan on screen, then we'll go to Dulcie, and that'll be the last question. Jordan? Okay. Dulcie, you get to
okay,
step
thanks
in
very
for
much.
Jordan.
Just a few quick questions, Jamie. This fence road, the plan is WFP convoys, and are these drivers generally Egyptians? And what are the risks involved, since you said IDF will escort only part of the way? And are you getting more cooperation from the Israelis since last week's quote, massacre? And what was the holdup yesterday at the checkpoint that caused the delay? Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks. The fence road, this is the first time we'll try this, and it's been something we've been trying to push for and advocate for weeks now. And what we hope is it will give us a chance to have a direct route into the north without us having to go through a very congested and quite troublesome, in terms of security vacuum, into the north. We would come out of Kerem Shalom and join I think it's Route 96, and that would allow us then to go quickly up the side of running parallel to the Gaza Strip and then come into an entry point. We would be escorted on the military road by IDF convoy escorts, but once we go inside Gaza, we would be then left to go on our own, because we don't want to have inside where you have a party to the conflict supporting our operations in that regard. What happens inside is something we're not quite aware of yet. We're doing a recce tomorrow morning before we deliver, to have an idea of the state of the careful there's no unexploded ordnance on the roads we go in, and then to find if we can see some suitable distribution points or storage and distribution points. Most likely it would be the Palestinian soccer stadium, but we could find other places depending how that goes. I think since the incident last week, I think Israel saw quite clearly how difficult it is to deliver assistance. People who don't understand humanitarian response in conflict situations thinks it's quite easy. It's a matter of sending trucks. But when you get right down to it, and you don't realize how desperate people are and how precarious the whole security is, it can be something that's quite a challenge. So I think we've seen some much more cooperation from Israel as a result of that realization. Yesterday's holdup, not quite sure exactly what it is. We've still get an answer. We normally wait at the crossing point in a holding area. And in the holding area, after a period of time, the trucks that are waiting there are given the green light to cross over into the north. We try to do that as early as possible to avoid what happens as crowds gathering at the other side and then stop us and then ransack the trucks. I don't know the specific reason why we were held up for longer than normal and why we were then rerouted to another road, which then caused the problem and the looting happened.
Thank you. I think, Jamie, are you okay taking one more question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you very much.
Jordan.
I have a question about Egypt, and I was wondering how you would characterize the role of Egypt in helping to address this crisis. And in your view, what would be the most important thing going forward for Egypt to do?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, Egypt is the major supply point for us coming in to Gaza. We also have, obviously, Amman is another pipeline, Kerem Shalom, but for the most part, about 70% of the goods that come in come via Egypt, Rafah. Much of the goods come from Al Arish, which is the storage point where the goods get dispatched from, and they get dispatched under the auspices of the Egyptian Red Crescent. Then they come into where we are, and then we offload them. It is an essential part of it. I mean, clearly, we would like to like all places, to work much more efficient and more effectively. And we're working to try and, in the sense of try to get prioritized cargo to come in a sequence that we can use. And sometimes that's not always the case. And I know that Sigrid Kaag is working on that with the Egyptian authorities to try and streamline the process there. And to do more is just basically to make it much more effective, especially if there's going to be a pause and we have an open run to try and supply much more into Gaza, and we have a short window. We'd like to try and make sure we maximize all the opportunities, both from Amman and from Egypt, to allow us to supply much more into Gaza itself.
Thank you very much, Jamie. We really appreciate your time. We want to welcome you back here anytime. And thanks again for your time. And if you have the patience, we'll do the briefing now. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
On a day.